Okay, so here is my Unreal level. It is starting out with just the test phase of a few triggers and getting things working. Most of the stuff I have is mechanically done, just needs to be implemented into an actual build. So if we go in and take a look at what's going on, we have our light toggle based off this block as a button to turn on an array of this light, and then those two over there. And depending on if you interact with E, it will toggle it on or off. Then the next thing we have is a very simple trigger box where it just triggers a matinee sequence of just the shelf falling off the wall. Next, over here we have two triggers to make this elevator work. One makes it go up, and then there's a second which is enabling it to go down. This is a matinee that we used for the actual platform going up and down, and the toggleable trigger for both of them actually just ends up making it proceed to go either play or play in reverse. Then the last thing we have here is our lock and key door trigger, which, as you notice, we can't actually interact with the door when we get close. So here's a little thing. I made a little inventory system where it displays the number of keys you need to enter said door. So if you press 1, you see on the side of the screen we get a 0, which prompts that we have 0 keys in our inventory. Now this over here is acting as our key placement texture. So as soon as we go into that and we pick it up and we press 1 again, we'll see we now have 1 key. Then, once we get in proximity to the door, it then opens up. We used a different type of animation. We actually used the transition bar instead of a matinee to make this one work because I was trying out different things. And then if we go and look at our keys again, it is now set back to 0 because we have consumed the key with the door. Now when we go to look at the actual blueprints we're using here, all right, so first one, we have quite a few here because we had to make quite a few different things. First one, that's a nice easy one, is our bookshelf animation, which is just a trigger for the bookshelf that overlaps casting to the first person player, which then plays matinee shelf animation to then play, which is it dropping. So that was easy. And I'm going to look into making the shelf then an object that can be interacted within the world. So that's something I want to explore into, but otherwise we had no problems with that. The toggleable light was slightly different because this one actually was something that we had to do something slightly different to make it work. So we have it set as a gate where you have to be within the trigger box and press the key E on the keyboard for it to work, and then it will cast to our light switch blueprint, and then it will toggle the light. Now, it only does this because we made an event within our light switch over here that was a custom event light toggle, which was we made our custom event for toggle light, which then was a light as an array sent into a loop cast for target light component to then toggle its visibility of if it's on or off, just from what the player can see. And this allows it to switch between it being on and off for if it is or isn't visible, and allowed us to put in this custom toggle light for here. Then as we go down, we have our elevator up and down. This was another gate where we used the pressing the E button while you're in the trigger area to work over a gate to then play the matinee. And then we have it set up as play matinee in reverse for when you're coming down. So this is actually two separate triggers, but I just lumped them together because I didn't understand the toggle until I learned a little bit more about that, but that'll happen in the near future. One thing I did have a little bit of a problem with the light toggle, if we go into first person character over here and we go over to this big long line, I tried using getting the coordinates from the first-person camera and using its vector to work as looking in the direction of said object to then press E on and interact to then make it work, but I don't know if I did something wrong in my blueprint or if this code just doesn't work as it is, but it just didn't seem to work, so I had to go to the gate system, which was just easier. Next thing, I guess we could go over the door, because I'm right here. This was my special key inventory for our string of telling if we had a key in our inventory or not. So it was just set up by pressing the 1 key on the number pad, and it looks for our integer of number of keys, and then it converts that through to a string, which then spits it out from our print string. So it's pretty easy there. And then when we go over to our blueprint for our door, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. And I believe no, because that was it. That was our whole line of code for the actual inventory that we had to deal with for keys. And then when we go over to the door here, we had 2 different versions of what goes on here. So first I'm going to go to key, and I'm going to show you what's going on with that. First it was when it begins overlap with the box of the object, it casts to the first person player, and then we do 2 things. First is we take our target number of keys and we add 1 to that integer, which then is cast from the first person player. So that gets added into their inventory, into our inventory set. Then it tells the actor to destroy itself. So it seems as if we picked up the key. I don't have it as an interact yet, but it would be pretty easy to do that because I can do that as a gate casting to the player. So that's not too bad. Then when we go over to the door blueprint, this is when we are overlapping with the box on the actual door. It casts the first person player and checks how many keys we have, and if the value is greater than or equal to the required number of keys, which we set over on the world outliner and its details over here, and if it is, we have our condition set as true. If it is, it will minus 1 key from our inventory, from our player, and then it will go through this timeline to then play our lerp of our target location to send the door upwards through our animation, which we put on our timeline over here. That was a little bit harder because I had to specify our target location using a key point, and it seemed to not want to use our originated key point that we had for where it was to where it needs to move to. So it would, once it interacts, it would jump from the initial point of where the door was we set in the world to 0.00 on the build, and then it would animate from there. So I had to fix it by re-updating where it was getting its inventory from. But other than that, that's about it. The rest is a little bit more debugging because I want to try to get that vector cast to work for hitting an object. Other than that, that's what I have for my triggers, and now I'm going to start implementing them into an actual game world.